To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, when thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru, oil and sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, all beings, enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
다 딕송게나.
ये सौ शान देगे दस
아니 통마라는 뭐 럽차르게 하고 말아.
뭐 럭스 ये 소로실라
나도 쉬어. 야, 늦었어. 돼야. 저쪽가에 손을와. 렌지니베 대외대상대. 렌지니베 대외대상대. 신도니가 전신시주네. 인제 군도 닝부 렘벨로 준제 매바 키와 신gel로스 좋아라 얘네 렌지 녜베 대외대선데 당가족 갈소라 렌저기 밀루 토바데 나를 렌지 삼예버에 송겨라 가레스나 티규디 미기와 추파 기와 추투 어딘데 주사에 대신도 공부선자 미기와 줄라 소바테조 레라부시 사투고요라 근데 망차 내서 냐와이다 던르다 근데리 깨바마도 사다미 고바토베다 티나네 미르나 산제 템바단제 근데티니 밀루토바데 신도 렌직 삼레 탈레 렌직 삼토버마도 망샤와 남주 네 깨왕에 바튼들이야 테테요레스 거라 렌직 예베 테테사데스 달와탄 조르와 쳬투발라 테와 튕기 상만 조르와 로와 산제지된 감수처네 최소발라 소바 어디 튕기 투수 상만 조라스 렌직 예베 테테사데 신도니에 가와스 인가주 남주 준준날에 연구해봐 천하권리야 차바르시다제 사루브제 나군제 대위나 나군제 대야데 뒷반 남주 미개와 사베 최대레스 가자 얘네 참살로 로르 깨치치 주디 세브차로 어디에네 야와투베 개회 삼로 삼급급을 시다 삼 여기도 와서 오라 어디도 가서 오라 지대 참으면다 들음 나서게와 로주 예시 때바나시 산제 응외지 산제의 텐데시 최성발라서바 퇴가 텐데 그때 삼삼라 계획로를 연결해서 거라 렌징이 베테베테사데 신도니에 같은 현실 존에서 인생 군도 닝불렘벨로 주제 매버케와 신gel로서 인생 군도 닝불렘벨로서도 ane nyeda chen kati yina ko tatari meche melu yagbo chi toba te tenda demba chi chego res wara nyingbo lembo res nyingbo lenya de kares na ane kibu chongo jeng chebe lamla tene nyingbo lam korwa ya teche lamna kugu medu tange ka
So Geshe-la's just having a little trouble because he can't see me to know when I am done talking. So we're trying to get that resolved. So to begin with, as the master Jelama Tsongkhapa says, this life of leisure and endowment that we have found just this once, knowing its great value, please bless me to take its essence day and night to make this life meaningful. And so when we think about it, the kind of good support, the good life that we have right now with all of these leisures and endowments, when we think about it, it's obtained just once, just sort of very rarely. And that is because the causes for such a rebirth are quite rare. To abandon the 10 non-virtues and engage in the 10 virtues is something that not everyone does. It's quite easy for us to accumulate without thinking all of these non-virtuous actions, which lead to a rebirth in the lower realms. And so here, to have obtained not just a human birth, but one in which we have all of the kind of endowments, such as having met with the Buddha's teachings, this is something that is extremely rare. To have these kinds of conditions wherein the Buddha came to the world, the Buddha's teaching gave teachings, and the teachings still remain. This is something that we shouldn't take for granted, but rather should see as something that is quite rare. As Shantideva says in his guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, likening this to like imagining there's a dark and stormy night. And it says, just as lightning illuminates the darkness of a cloudy night for an instant, in the same way, the power of the Buddha occasionally, by the power of the Buddha, occasionally people's minds are turned toward virtue. to. So if you have a very dark a night thick with black clouds, and there's a flash of lightning that illuminates everything for just a moment in that long course of the night. And so, too, this kind of situation that we have right now is something like a brief flicker, a brief moment. And as Jelamon Tsongkhapa says, reflecting on this, recognizing the rarity and preciousness of such a human rebirth that we have right now, please bless me to day and night. Make it meaningful. Take the essence of this life.
Oh yeah. Oh, that is it. Oh yeah, chichu. Oh yeah, that is. Oh, then ta nyingbu lemba hase nyingbu ramde ta sum lengora. Inde ta nga zu chu shede. Oh, nyingbu kari lengora sana. Chi ta tangbu de kyo chima la da mi. Ko ban cheber che tanda chu ba na shi. Inde tene sanje temba. Oh, chikaya ro chi dan je ne ko. Tanda chu ba de kone kondo pe ya tanda le. Den jo milu chi chu be ten cheber che nye gora. Oh, di tanda le tene nyingbu langora. Oh, di tanda le chima 내가 그때는 라다미 최초에 된 개발세 단다 최초바데 코네 빼야 그때 개발세 토베 님불량 거래서 대체도 가르쳐 그래서나 이렇게 교대 쪽으로 어디인데 샹라 쳐와 샹라 너바시 샹 동해와 생각에 소저발라 소와 영화 예수님 거네 미개와 주도바 샹라 쳐와 미개와 주도바 야 샹라 쳐와시나 샹라 동해용 그래 삼세베 삼베 그네라니 샹라 쳐와 바로 되네 소저발라 소와 샹라 펜버드베 샤베 삼비 그네라니 네 샹라야 샹지 소저발라 소와 어다 미개와 주도바 개와 주도바테 야부 주도바이나 텐팅 년다 셈해봐 요아심만 밀리 개발시엔시 톱고요 삼베나 니리 메체나라 샬라 체베 메케와 빠 샬라 펜베 개와줄라 소바티 트루기 삼 니리 메체나리아 다 주고 샤고 사래 안데르시게 샬라 체베 가르소래 메케와 빠 개와줄 트루고도와 대님부 당불량에 대대래도 아주 최시고요나 요아시마 최초에 때 개발했던데 토베던달이야 샬라서에 미개와 주과 개와 주고래서 이 니리 메시나를 소소 영화에 섬을 슈다타네 주고도 와 이때 토리아 개와 토마메번에 사셔베 미개와 마보사요레 섬 대저 강가를 샥바시 그래서 대저리아 샥바시 차차와라 소바 네 텐데
So here, in terms of taking the essence of this life or making this meaningful, it can be done by practicing the Dharma and the various levels of practice. We have the kind of lowest level, the middling, and the supreme. When we think about even at the lowest level, having this kind of life of leisure and opportunity, wherein we have not only a human rebirth, but have met with the Buddha's teachings, we should make sure that at the very least, we are ensuring that we gain again a good rebirth, a kind of rebirth with all of the conditions to be able to continue to improve and develop in a future life. And if we want to make sure that we have such a life in the future, we need to make an effort to accumulate the kind of causes that bring that about. So here, all of the kind of negative actions, those non-virtuous actions, are things that we should avoid. And in turn, we should strive to benefit others as much as we are able to. So recognizing that when we do sort of harmful, violent actions towards others, we are bringing about their suffering out of concern for ourselves, but also love for others. We refrain from those kinds of actions like killing and stealing and lying and so forth. And on the other hand, we try to engage in those kinds of actions that are beneficial for others, protecting life. being kind and loving to others. And this is something that we do on a continual basis, a regular sort of day to day kind of practice. And if we are able to engage in that sort of practice on a day to day basis, then we can ensure that in the future we will have the kind of life, this kind of special support wherein we are able to continue to practice the Dharma. So, really, this means on a day to day basis, watching what is happening with our body, speech, and mind, kind of purifying or correcting that, and also recognizing that we have in previous lives accumulated many non-virtuous actions and making an effort to purify those non-virtues. And again, look at the kind of activities that we engage in on a day-to-day basis. This is how we ensure that at the very least we have a good rebirth again in the future.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Tinica soda. Oh, the Chudi Trubayina. Sendela Devarawa. Rasamba Kiba Yungure. Make it to the Pankawa shooting in the Samlatana. Suzo Samba Kibu Teva Yungura. And the Shan Nang Midrepshina Teva Yungura. Rather Yamdo Dengue, Chiso de Shina, Koteva Yungura. Chichil Nova Chigo Mara, Chichila Pemberton, the Pemberton Guara. I take you to court Sendela Devas. The Vecure, Jidechima Pembares, the Gason Shikawa Sambulia, Sungura. Oh, didn't she? Yeah, teach you love Shana to do it.
So if we do this, we are happier in our own life right here and now. If we avoid harming others and we do things that are beneficial for them, we ourselves are happier and we make others around us happy. And so the kind of society or the group that we live in will be happier. And so when we refer to happiness, that's really within this life, but we're also creating the causes for benefit in terms of a good in our future life.
Oh, yeah, that's the Ningu. Ilea, those Samlia, check Samlu set Toro Shenera. Oh, that's a negab. Yes, only Tara Mondo Lamikova Toba de Agurete. Ina Lamikova Tea, then to Tewashimaresam, negabco. Yes, only to the Tewasamato. Elaya Tunge Mabuyore. Roa, give it Tunge, gave it Tunge, Nave Tungela Soba, Tunge Mabuyordo. Oh, Tezu Kanka Samlutane. It Lada me, Yoatia, Yoachima, Tarbada Tamjashimbe Koma Trubechedo, Nego Ludin de la Tego with a Techedo, Yoalanko with a Ludin Sambu the Top Gurmado, Ludin Korango Chanet and to Tewachima Resam. Leda Nyumbe Shawado Chune Yoalanko with Tele Taroshimachena, Litungele tend to Tawate Yogumedo Samne. Yechedo. Good Bank we are. Oh, take la carriers, and then your more bank we are there. You tagi out and good. You more bank we are done. Seba the manna, Chakba the manna. That Tambo Tome Mariba, Tome Mariba, Wangi, Tala Chakba Yogiva. The Seba the manna, and Shenda controllers of a Yomo Shenda Yomara. Rala Chakba Wangi, and Shenda Ganga. Condonga Yetrato and Dress with the Zukanga Yogura. O de Sebade Dosuna. And it's Lele, Layuna, Lele, Certain Gigi, I never took into some Gigi, Yendi Omara. O Timeduco, Condo Danga, Jeta, Trato, and Dress him da. Noa, Netado Zimbabwe, some social shaboche, Geshe Shanda, Keshujuda, Tinder sometime. Oh, to let him, you more like to ten. Oh, Naje Condo Trato la Soba, Teleton to ten. Seba de Pa, Paya Tabshin, and the Tarwa Togudua. Rala Rawameba, Pumbu Doleche could be Kyoatele Tarwa Gore. The Echedone Jonathan, I remember Kongura, I remember something around to the Babata. You get Chagwa, the Condo Naje Trato and Dressim la Soba. Oh, there's a needing medicine alpha. Yorutane, Yorutane, this Sebache could do something. The Tarve Deva, from the Ulote to Mele Tendo Tarwa. Rala Rawame, Pumbu Doleche, Tele Tendo Tawa, Chichago, some. But the Echedone, Yamol in Yabutage, Yamo, Yirin Betsenale, Yorutane, Tabshiche would wa. Tichanani, Yumbu, drink the Nele Tarbada, Tabje Kebashe. Harvard to Bechi to Begora, Alexe, Elek sudu tagi tendo lada mi koba tobate ten keba juro mebe tewa ke marwa tanda tarba tosuna ngeba lek bara jua meba tendo juro meba rwa o tisuza ngelek tarba ase gora ya o tichilamna.
So, in terms of taking the essence of this life that we have right now, there's the lowest level, and then beyond that, a kind of higher level, one begins to contemplate that even if you are born as a human or a god, you're not freed from all of the various kinds of sufferings that occur for samsaric beings. So, you're still subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death, and all kinds of other types of sufferings, even as a human or a god. And so here, this level of contemplation seeks for liberation, for getting free from all of the various afflictions and really that uncontrollable rebirth due to karma and the afflictions. So here, although even if one gains a good rebirth as a human or a god, that's not going to bring about definite freedom from suffering. So, a being at this level recognizes that we need to abandon all of our afflictions. When you have first this initial ignorance that then gives rise to kind of attachment to one's own side and so forth. And in particular, one recognizes the fault of craving, that kind of craving that fosters, that nurtures karmas that lead to renewed rebirth. And so, if you were able to avert that, to get rid of both of the fundamental, that initial ignorance that grasps at an I and holds to some kind of autonomously, independently existent I, as well as if you get rid of the kind of craving that acts as a condition for nurturing karma, if you don't have that condition to nurture karma in the future, then you won't take further rebirth. So, seeing the fault of the various afflictions, our jealousy and our anger and our attachment and so forth, particularly seeing how, when as long as we have afflictions, that leads to taking rebirth uncontrollably under the control of our karma and afflictions. One at this level sees that really, in order to gain definite freedom from that cycle of rebirth, one needs to eliminate the afflictions completely. So, looking at the process by which that initial ignorance, which grasps at an I, and then how out of attachment to one's own side and aversion for the other, one then continues this cycle of rebirth. And so, at this point, a being of sort of middling capacity recognizes I need to have this kind of definite freedom, freedom from that cycle of taking rebirth under the control of karma and the afflictions. And due to seeing the faults of the afflictions, they recognize that we want to gain definite goodness, a kind of liberation, even though a good rebirth as a human or a god is better than the lower realms. It's not definite goodness in the sense that it's kind of like a stepping stone that can lead to that lasting happiness of liberation. So at this point, one goes from striving for a kind of temporary reprieve from the sufferings of samsara to wishing to get out of those entirely, wishing to gain the definite goodness of liberation.
Oh yeah. Oh, ti ndu kasa ta tanda nyiri mezuna samlutane. Nga samsange. Nga sokuta mandre, soada mandre, rawa dushita mandre, tanda luta semda, draw me gege ngarachi na shagdo angazo. Ling sigdo lingbuchi. Ko ling drapsi loss si yoba shagdo. Oh, tindre ti lea tangzi sigdo angazo mabushe saimba. O tindre samlu tiche tela tene ne kontru da nga che da trado da mile tongju che da nyemo mangbu chigra ni me ko o tezu kanga che ma chune o tange samlu te ko do ya de mile trado chigdo dresem chigdo nga je chigdo tongju chigdo sam ngi che nyiri me tena lo tanga ya samlu tindre ko tindre ma so nyemo re sa nyur ta ya chena ne ko joan dogro Oh, tendre chenadi soso chendele soso kibo. Rangi nangmi ina randa nyamdo lega chinge ina changmonta timbo. Yoro toz mandi chungda saba kong o ta saba kongure chado chigyo mare. Samti nyamo re kwa koje ki gyuri sam. Tendre samlo tanda chendele rang dewa re. Me kyawa chimbo ta tendo. Tarwe koba tobe kyulindu yora. Sheza kibun dringi chende chi ina ko. 내가 대화 시도 쳇들을 라셔 상마 대회 줄도와라 타르 치마 겨와 치마 들려야네 라라 펜바 너미진 드레붕 엄마데 겨와 치마 대 용거라 어디실람나 야
So, here in our day-to-day lives, if we can recognize, we have this sense of an this I that is somehow like independent, apart from our body, apart from our mind and our feelings and so forth. We have this sense of an I that's like concrete and real, somehow separate and apart from the aggregates. And as long as we have that kind of sense of an I, that grasping at an I, then we give rise to all kinds of various afflictions of jealousy and competitiveness and pride and contempt and so forth. And so a being of this kind of a practitioner of this level recognizes that these afflictions, recognizing them as afflictions and how they create bad results, they try on a day-to-day basis to reduce those afflictions. They see that it all stems from this misperception of an I, and thereby are working in their day-to-day life to get rid of these various afflictions. So when they say have a disagreement with others, they're more able to practice patience. Or when you see or encounter various difficulties because of seeing the faults of engaging in the afflictions, this kind of practitioner avoids those afflictions, reduces them on a day-to-day basis, which creates greater happiness in the here and now, in our day-to-day life. It makes both ourselves and others happier. And although the kind of happiness of this life is just part of the result, the real ripening result comes in terms of the future lives that we, in terms of the future and gaining liberation.
Oh yeah, what do that ne? Nimbo rabdi you chembe samle to korkeora. Oh tene ta rachibu tarwato koye tungele tel tesam samle tane mandibore samgeora. Rangi chende pamala soba, nyenitula soba, nita kimbe na nangmila soba, puputula soba, sasangla soba. Ya soso go chende la kaala cheba songo yuna ya. Oh, tezu sangma, ya samlu che matane soso chebu, tabra toyo samlu tana digma resam. Tezu sangma rana shi kiwa tongma beba na kuha ko tunga nyanga de yore. Tanda maungba da dus te kuna pe kyobo resam. Konzo ya tunga da tre tapshi. 제 통계지 제고래 삼랑 첸데 파만 연절을 써봐. 대수 삼말 삼르다라. 대수 강가 드네 야와르 보르네 삼르체 마타네 소수체부. 나텔이야 삼르다데 저 통만 매번나라. 코에 동에 gen나네 단다 마오바나에 비테 삼르달이 요코랑게네. 동에 세두자 다가 세디체부 동에 마로와. 대수 삼르 코네라 나시. 건조한테네 동에 된데 냐데라 마오바나 된데 냐게레 삼네. 첸데 파말라 소바 소소 강ala cheba yunaya o tezol samutagi wara pada madam bungajo parshiba marshiba ta tezo kasura jude manga jonde takshen yamji yongyo ba jonde tezo samutagi wardo o tine shi samuta te samuta ne o ta chende pamada nyende tozo kadin chembo re ye memba ye kadin chembo mabu re ina shi kyawanga ma chi kira minde shi la yina Tenga mache kade mel la na tandura se ke la na pada ma sende na shima bu yongura yende semjen de yawala thoma me de semjen de pa che ma che tension bu che de tension bu kya yo ma de se ende ko ta che che yo ma to te yende so so tili genge jiso kare ne me do samla o ko che chana yo nga ma nga pa ma tension tende chore ko te de chore Tanda kawa randa draw you and Emma to the Tanda tree the left the gira. You sigra. Oh, today, Karina, Jurisigre, someday. And it's how much Kijipe and Oma Shamba Mado. So, Joangama Trangere, Kanga, Trangi, and Joangama mirrors, Joala, and Tanda, Padamada, Kabuni to Karis, Shisha, Ranga Chidova. No, Conduce Sarah, Tende, get a Sigra. Or Tende Samlutane. Rather don't reaching get to say daily part of mother near than you struggle. Tender Majuna, Joangama, and the Jurte or Resam. Kishipen and Oma Shimba Mato, somewhat in the jury or Resam. And then there's a Kanga, Chibare, Shayar, do Medu, 심지어 탐제다 대화다 체도다 동해다 대하고도 대진데 제통게 랑게 원에 쓰겨라 랑게 원에 심지어는 초리 매버체 심지어 인버점을 패도 쓰겨마다 심지어 탐제 동해를 대화를 고토베치도 요마라 참아 먼저 산제 장매버 천사를 탄다 심지어 마부 대어라 심지어 탐제서야 돼 랑게 원에 심지어 참마게 동해 통게 진데시 두고도 삼겨라 심지어 진데 삼데 심지어 탐제게 된도서 라는 양해를 연계해서 간가 되게 전부도 아주 시당을 삼을다 레레레 삼을 마다는 팽기 매송도 와 심지어 탐제에서 현다질 예배스를 삼을다데 심지어 탐제에서도 랑게 예고다 연계돼서 간강에 삼을다고도 와 심지어 레레레라 네게 마셔 지레 tinja 가르가르 교가마 강 펜도 빼셔 지레사 인데 삼르타 레레레레 삼르타 라냠도 연계도네 애니 지다 삼르타 tin데 제고르 성도 tin데 가르소래 라다냠도 예ದಂ게 도주 강가 그때 쳔보임보다 그래서 창매 등 들어봐 지고도 뒤에 정도라 다다라를 내버 요 말에 라견 군세 연대 군대지 산제지 고바 들어봐 차기 삼 이리 매스나 견나시나 세 되네 연대나시나 좀네 가정 거나 저그세 연대 군대지 가사시 유라 차기 삼사태고도 와 대체네 기부 첨부 샘제고도 와 대질라나 인님부 개체셔더라 다 대중나다 천들라 라다셰 야와다께서 샘먹으러 와 라레셰 개체와 찍으러라 어제니 겨와 땐도 대와 탐색심배 고바토베 귤러도 요라 야 되질라나
So then the sort of highest way to make this life meaningful that we have right now is by thinking, well, if I were to seek just my own liberation and disregard all of these beings around me who have shown me great kindness, that's really not suitable. But rather, all of these beings that, like those that I cherish and value in this life, we should recognize that they too, since beginningless time, have been taking rebirth uncontrollably. They suffer due to the kind of same conditions that we do. So we think I need to find a way to free them all as well, not just sort of disregarding them or forgetting about them. And here again, when we think about the suffering of others, we shouldn't think of just the sort of situations that look like suffering, but here we are talking really about taking rebirth again and again uncontrollably due to the force of karma and the afflictions. And so, whoever it is that we cherish and value in this life, our mother, our father, our friends, our family, our children, whoever it might be, when we talk about them and the kindness that they have shown us, we should recognize that it's not just those beings who in this life have shown us great kindness, but really we have all taken rebirth beginninglessly without any kind of beginning. And therefore, in these countless rebirths, we can't really point to any single being who hasn't acted in that capacity. Although we may not remember it, the fact is that those who are around us, even the one that we are maybe getting angry at right now, was one being who cherished us, who showed us great kindness in the past. So, although we might not recognize it, all sentient beings have acted in this capacity. And so, when we say all sentient beings, we should include all of them, recognizing that, again, countless Buddhas have come into the world and have tried to help lead beings out of this state. But yet, there are still infinite sentient beings who still remain. And the ones who are left here, we should recognize have acted towards us with great kindness. When we begin to try to contemplate working for the benefit of all sentient beings, though, we shouldn't have this sort of category that seems like something other, all sentient beings that's over here, while we disregard those who are right around us. But rather, this kind of mental training begins with those who are right around you. We have to think about the person who is next to us, to our right, to our left, and we we begin by thinking in that way, and then we come to encompass all sentient beings. It's not like there's some other category of this thing called all sentient beings, but really it begins by training our mind in relation to those that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. And when we have that kind of recognition that then begins to encompass all sentient beings and wishing to free them from their kind of suffering situation, we recognize that at the current time, we don't have the ability to be able to benefit these sentient beings, to get them out of samsara, because we ourselves are still subject to that. And so there's the wish to become a fully enlightened Buddha, one who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities. And so striving toward that state, trying on a daily basis to remove whatever sort of faulty minds we have and develop all good qualities, we give rise to this kind of attitude. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And so really, this is the very best way that we can take the essence of this life, that we can make it meaningful, come to a point in which we learn to cherish others more than we cherish ourselves.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is that and that ko. Karsora. Yang ngarazu tinde samgitwa. Chere shebe ina yang jachi she sona. Inge shingi yu samsa. Yang jai labgitu te shingi yu sam. Tinde sam dewa. Shingi yu sam te shena yang jai yang tu te kora. Migi shebe de yang tu te. Rawa sosu samlu yang tu tangura. Sheba jangjang tunda marwa. Sheba te yang jia she yang nye yang samlu tang chen ene ko niba cher rubyo che se de ko ngazu pe chane nam ju she chora. Chili ya sha chi te sona, chili ya sha chi te na. Ko sha de ko ro nyong ge marwa. Hab che cho jing ni kya je ma mi sha gre. Tine yang jia kari yo se mi cha de chu ta ne chi kishi do da chi gra. O dina shi chi ju amar so do. Che nye ti ro nyong so samlu ta shi da che ti che gora. O ti yende kar so da. Inde yang tu samlu ta ya te ya. Neba ye sam ti pa cha sha ye sam. Ya gen ru ye sam gora. Ma do nam sa chi chu tu re te chi shi bu chi men ra ji cha ye samlu ta ji yo ma re. Che se de ko sem de ye to da ro. Sem le kya ba ru do we. Ene lunga ya kunju le kya ba ru do we. Miwata mera to kya ru do ta ora. Ye to da le yang tu samlu ta ya ro. Yang tu samlu ta de kon pe ro. Ne ba che she be to pa sha sha ge ora. Te ya gen ro yo re. Sem ge yen de do ka ga. Ka je sam na ko yang tu kum ri che ne ya gen ro re ma to ti ma to thap shi shan da ke yo ma ro. Nga zu nam ri to na yong yo ba. Sem ge yen de to zo. Jamba yenadra, Ningji yenadra, Soba yenadra, Tenet, Amito Bolo yenadra, Kare yenaya. Yana yandu samlutan, Takbate samlutan, ya never church red ora. This and Sechen to Negma Richera. I again do a mare to Deke Marang, and the Samluna Namsan hope to imagine that Kebachen Roma do something to Keban do yora. I sat them Saru Sabro. Roa. Shi tsugu yora, shi chir sambida pa cha sha yora. O te indu kar soda. Kanji ritu ngamba ya ta long trang ma de. Ritu samge yende to zo. Ritu komba che ya te ra re se ya je kone do ya de. Se jen yo ma re se ya je ma ro te ma re ka je komba na te sa pa cha tu sambida no ba chir sha do yora. O te so do komba che ya ne ya do komba kumji che te ra re ya je do ya to da ya. Yende katse kumdi cheba te sambi ya tene ya gen ru ye sam o tene ya bu chu so tene samlu ta pa cha sha thu so sa shi ya bu chu so sam sa o tene samlu ta ko ra ma to ke ti ta lam ma ta chi ro de ka so te ba jang ba sha so go do poram shin shu ning bu chi ya me se Poram Bishing Tizini Chilo Papa de Sa Samaris, Teva de Chilo Papa Nasher. Nalo Rongamo de Yongo Resongodoa. O T in the O Pay Abu Keva Sambu Tiri Chanju Simle Samlataya Choso, Tongbanyele Samlataya Choso, Pay Pasha Lapchimbu Shaso Samsa, Kawa Kom the Range Kevala Chesu Ranche, in the Samlatangura. O any year into Neta. tiri ma namsa ji yundara shibji geguyo samsa chayda indi ta ge me dusa ene yushaya nyaga yorwa ti indi ta tunda kechik mawa chasa simje tamje ge tuwa trup tungge ge gyö kunsa yunde kunde ji sanje ji koba chi tobar sha de che do che nyene nyeri meche navle raga yana yandu kumri chene tar sanje ji koba tobar sha de che do tambe chu nyengi yinsam kunu se tamne sembar shursa tandris.
So here, when we hear the Dharma, when we listen to the Dharma, sometimes we can think, oh yeah, I know this, like I've heard this before, I know this. But really, when it comes to hearing the Dharma, it's not as though we're hearing it just to sort of know it, but really to integrate it into our mind. We hear something again and again and contemplate it again and again because that is beneficial for our minds to be able to actually accustomate to that or habituate to that. So here there's a saying that like we shouldn't approach hearing the Dharma the way a dog approaches a piece of meat. Like when a dog is given a piece of meat, if they don't usually get that, especially, they're going to just sort of like get chow down on that really quick. They don't even think about it. They're hardly even chewing or tasting it. But the way that we should listen to the Dharma is one in which we're really like chewing it over in our mind, like relishing that taste, cherishing the taste of it. And we shouldn't expect like instantaneous dramatic results, but rather should rejoice in just putting down some imprints in our mind. If there is some kind of a difference over time in our mind through the practice of the Dharma or through thinking about having learned and contemplated the Dharma, that's really what we are looking for, a difference in terms of our way of thinking and comporting ourselves. It's not as though we should expect to have like miraculous powers or some sort of clairvoyance after hearing, but rather we should really value the putting down of imprints in our mind. As Dharmakirti says in the Pramanavartika, the qualities, to develop qualities of mind requires mental engagement. Whether we are talking about compassion or patience or understanding selflessness, we have to repeatedly engage the mind in those various topics in order for that to get stronger and stronger. But the qualities of mind are such that there is no limit to them. I won't quote the exact verse, but it is the case that when we engage the mind, familiarize it with something again and again, there's actually no limit to the development of those mental qualities. So although it isn't something where we can expect an instantaneous dramatic change, the kind of foundation that we are laying through these imprints is something that is really going to lead to change. Those imprints get stronger and stronger, however much more we engage in them. And so recognizing that gaining this kind of familiarity is something quite precious and good, we should really be happy. We should think like, I'm so fortunate to be listening to these teachings, to have this kind of opportunity. And again, strive to really take the essence of the teachings in the sense of like, in the same way that a sugar cane, the kind of outside skin doesn't have the real taste of it, we shouldn't be satisfied with that. We should really go for the nectar of that. So here, sort of rejoicing, having a happy kind of mind, thinking that I'm putting down these imprints of the Dharma in my mind, and may they remain for a long time. May this be something that continues to develop and grow within me. If we don't have this kind of approach to the Dharma and learning about the Dharma, if we expect some kind of instant dramatic change, then there's the danger of us thinking like, oh, well, I tried this and it didn't work, and we kind of throw it away. And so here, as we approach this listening to the Dharma, we should think that, again, with a kind of happy attitude at the opportunity to get to put down these imprints in our mind, we should think, I'm listening to this Dharma for the sake of being able to become one who is able to benefit all sentient beings, a completely enlightened Buddha who has developed all good qualities and eliminated all faults. And for the sake of being able to gain such a state, I'm going to familiarize my mind again and again with these precious teachings.
Oh yeah. What this one? Don't have to my lotion. It's some today, ba. Oh yeah. The be choose some but nam nese. I didn't my lotion do that. The person get some dead they choose some but nam nese wara. Tujanam Negab Ngondo Lami Koban Tobadas, that under the share Sarimba, Negab Nesongi Kyoa Malashe, Lami Koba Tobata. Neba Legba Tarvadata, the Gisheba, Nelek said, Neba Lebas in Jura Meba, Rawa, Chita Dungele Tarsonane, Jua Meba, Tendo, Tempote at the Sigora. The Koya de Wonders in Tembuke Omarwa, Conjutura. Oh, Nele Tarvada Tamje Kimbe, Nele Tarvada Tamje Kimba, Bashigi Cheto Yelasta, Titanda Ocho Songotoa, Tandangazu Lapsayamba, Modulami Koban, Tobala Karakudo, Nele Tarva Tobala Karu, Tamje Kimbe Koban, Tobala Karakuto, Susan Messina, Samuel Karatangoto, Titanda Lapsayamba Otire. Yeah, Tenji Deberjo Ayala, Juni Kone Koran Jubata, Tinin Dogbe Chu Sambale, Tuber Chagu Shese. The Koalia, Kyotobala, Kyotola, Tende Yala, Juni Kone Samlutan Gudwa. Oh, Tende Yala, Juni Kone Koya Kandis Kore Sam, Samsa Samluti, and then I Samsa Chakbaki, and it didn't dream my dish in the Kondro. You want any lunga use some Jawa, Lanju, Quap, your pension less of your. Name give a less of doing as only key. Chakbe wangi give a letter to Sasuna, Chakbe wangi sonza, and a lot of milk lay to do. Oh, Jinde Yala Juni, Quar and Jubada, Quar Cordati, Tommy Mariba, even to the Banja Cordashera. And those who did Donna, did over and did Donna, did over. Dogbe Rinpoche, Italian Rosason, and do it. Koran Juba that thing in Dogbe Chu Sambe, a Truber Chaquish, so Koya Tungelia Tambuko, Jona de Bishuk Chambers Korva, Ginju Sora, the Yana Yando said that she would make Jonga Manawa that and Rikitin and Milikina, Katina Toma Mevan and Yanda with this Amlatana, and a Sambachoko at the Shora. Amabola to stay there, there's a Kawakara Kito and the Kai Samsara. And that's the Kajang to me that it then draw Shagyo Mara, Ninjunti, Samloko. Thinking dog with somebody, Truber Chaku. They chine Tomar, Mondo Drube Tapsu, Kidigi, Lede Titu Joala Mombe, Maribe Wange, Nyandu Kawa Pensi, Mikiwe less on the Nyawa Yeda Tondo, Koar Kurtu Sambate Sambana, Tele Tende Jolase, Teda Treve, and the got a Tapsu Kidigi, Kidigi Lele and Debutidu, Joa Yeshi, Jidebe Yanda Betawa and Dember Shetese, or Tade Kasura. Chita Kibuchu in a co. Tome Mariba Kunelana de Yongiora. In a Kibuchun goes to Tombanyeta, Tome Mariba, Tombany, Tanzi de Geshe Gumara, Le Jumdela Mona, Le Kewachena, Debutiva, you had a Mikewachena, Debutunga, you had La Mone, and a Mikewachuchena, Yason like Tepa Kewachutuna, had a mille, Landeg and Namshala Mamma Bachen, esse. Mishiba Momba said the Landella Mone. You want to know Yabu Yunga to Mikua Sana to Buyumba Hamagone, any less of your destined the Shera. Tommy Mari was a Tamotake Shagumara, Kibuchunga de China. Oh, Lieutenant. This way, what about the Chilamna? Yeah, do you?
No. So then picking up in the text, and we are on page 96 of the English, beginning with any teaching of the Buddha is only for the sake of his followers temporarily obtaining higher rebirth. Higher rebirth meaning sort of like happiness, and ultimately the high state of a human or a god, and ultimately obtaining the definite goodness of liberation and omniscience. So here, again, as we've been speaking of, any teaching of the Buddha is really for the happiness and benefit of beings, whether it is for sort of temporarily obtaining a higher rebirth or ultimately obtaining the definite goodness of liberation and omniscience. And so the way in which one contemplates this, or furthermore, you must accomplish these by contemplating the way we enter cyclic existence and the way we end that process in terms of the 12 factors of dependent arising. So here, when it comes to the being of initial scope, a being of initial scope, although they aren't looking as closely at the kind of initial ignorance and that process of the 12 links, they understand the way that our karma, our non-virtuous and virtuous karma, lead to various rebirths. Now, here, someone who is striving for liberation is looking for that kind of state which is unchanging. A temporary good rebirth is not going to lead to a stable, lasting happiness. Anything in samsara is not stable, is not in the nature of happiness. But in order to and then strive for that state of definite goodness, one needs to contemplate the kind of process, again, beginning with this initial ignorance, this thought of I and then mine. And when we have this kind of attachment to our own side, aversion for the other, when there's something that's slightly not right, we engage in various karmas, in various actions that in turn lead to further rebirth within samsara. So understanding the kind of forward order, how these links lead to the next, and how we reverse that, how we get out of that, is the way in which a being really is able to generate a real sense of renunciation. By contemplating the defects of samsara, there's a sense of sort of revulsion with that. But then knowing the way to get out comes from thinking about these various, the process of the 12 links of dependent arising. So the method to do this is as follows. In the beginning, as the means of attaining higher rebirth, you contemplate how happiness and suffering are effects that arise from virtuous and non-virtuous karmic actions, and how, through the influence of ignorance, you accumulate non-virtuous karmic actions and then pass through cyclic existence as hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals. Contemplating this, you desire freedom from this process. To attain this freedom, you acquire a correct worldly view, which is an understanding with conviction that happiness and suffering arise from virtuous and non-virtuous karmic actions, respectively. So even for a being of the initial scope of motivation, one needs to think about this kind of correct worldly view in the sense of virtues and non-virtues being the cause of happiness and suffering, respectively. And so out of ignorance, then, creating karmic actions, the whole process of the 12 links is not extensively contemplated so much as understanding in this correct worldly view of the connection between karmic actions and their results.
Oh yeah, interesting. Oh yeah, this was land. 대다 대회 탑수 기부 총회 값서 다래 메게와 주대파 개와 주투에 탑될 가르 삼을 땅고르스나 직대배 양다배 따와서도 동반이데 tinde게 삼을 땅고 말와 직대배 양다배 따와서 가서 메게와 주나리아 넘심 로타시요바 이들 개와 주투에 tin도초들 양다배 따와서 직대배 양다배 따와서라 이 동반이데 tinde게 말해 이 가르에서는 소주발라 소바 미게와 주레사나 교황해봐 첸델레라 미게 샤미게 네 로샤라도베게 저 치마텔라 녀와 여다 ton들서 동해 마무 용그레 세더라 전에 미게와 아까서 양답에 따와데 가르스나 그 개와 상발라 때네 드부 마우발라 때와라다 미고발라 소바 토그레스 개와 주디 좀나 미국가 주도 사회나 개선을 찍으래서 텔레 이시에 텔레 양답에 따와서도 직대배 양답에 따와서 텔레 이시에는 다 미국가 주도 빠 나마도 개선을 찍어서 요 대규디티 인삼 요 주도 좀 미국가 주도 빠나 하다미 고바 야보토고요 아삼 첸델레 라다 셰키바이 대외교이 기베교이 마오발레야티 야보여삼 텐데티 요는 되어마도 동반이데 tinde게 시켜고 말아 야 뒤질라나 이도 지대 가서 렌델 몸베 마릭발라 소반도베 렘반남 so. Oh, the dear. Kitty Land, Drebu Titu Junga, Yeshi, Jitembe Yanta, Betawat, Tempershet, Landella Mombe, Mariba, Gagba, Laos of one dogbe Rimba, and then Rimbanam Sambale, Shala Seve, Tigba Mikiwa Chupon, Shambenji Kewa Chushindu, Loba, Lobe, Modu Lame Koba, Tobar Shebata. Na, Karene, nghe songi, Jawa Tam, nghe songi, Jawa Tam, Mayimbar, Tendo Lami, Jawa Dan Chebe, Koale, Yonso Treve, O Tibato Chilam, Tindido, Koale, Yonso Treve, Tarba Tobe, Tapsu, Kunjun Tembe, Ju, Juyi Tende Tuda. Tungé tembe debut tende trugi kone doa drift to kurzu teta tende doa tende samlutane tisherwa ane jui tende to da debut tende to so de ganzo kasi yala choni shede tome mari bashe niban doji she sumba namshi she sumcho so ne keba seba kuba lemba chuba siba to tele jui tende to segra.
So here, when it comes to having the correct kind of worldly view, again, for someone who is of the initial scope, they abandon the 10 non-virtues and engage in the 10 virtues based upon having a kind of correct worldly view. So when we think about the 3 non-virtues of mind, covetousness, malice, and wrong view, wrong view includes not just the kind of an initial ignorance grasping at a truly existent self, but also the kind of ignorance of causality, of karmic cause and effect. And so here, for a being of small scope, they initially need to gain a kind of conviction that non-virtue will lead to suffering and virtue leads to happiness. And so when you have that kind of conviction in the relationship between virtue and happiness and non-virtue and suffering, then you will make the effort to kind of create those particular causes. So here, as it continuing in the text, to attain this freedom, you acquire a correct worldly view, which is understanding with conviction that happiness and suffering arise from virtuous and non-virtuous karmic actions, respectively. You then contemplate the stages of cessation, the cessation of the ignorance that is confused about cause and effect, and so forth. And then due to that, you thereby abstain from the 10 non-virtuous karmic actions, harming others, and learn properly the 10 virtuous karmic actions through which you help others. In this manner, you attain higher rebirth, the state of a human or a god. And so having that kind of conviction with a correct worldly view, one then engages in virtue and abstains from non-virtue. Furthermore, to obtain nirvana, the complete liberation from cyclic existence, freedom not only from rebirth in the miserable realms, but also from rebirth in the happy realms of humans and gods, you contemplate how you cycle through rebirths as the 6 types of living beings by means of the 6 causal factors of dependent arising that are the true origins of suffering, and the 6 effect factors of dependent arising that are true sufferings. So here, then, at the sort of middling scope, one is contemplating the full causality of the 12 links of dependent origination. As we have explained earlier in the context of describing these, there are the 6 causal factors, which are that initial ignorance, the kind of formative actions, consciousness, the first 3 links, as well as then that craving, grasping, and becoming, the 8th, 9th, and 10th links. And all of the rest then fall into that of being the 6 effect factors of dependent arising, which are the true sufferings. Yeah, Diksha.
기본 드린다 대소에나 ane 교회 텐데 투단 데뷔 텐데 투 삼베코네 ane 드와 리 투가를 하다 멜레케나야 동해지 라시체 바하고네 텔레타베네 타르바 전도니와 타르베 람투고요 레세르시도사 동해 드니까르시라 데뷔텐데 투기 코네 코아 도아 리투도 쿠르츠 도아 리투도 쿠르츠 삼바 쿠르츠 삼바다 텔렌 독베 추다 독베 탑 텔렌 독베 추 삼데 람덴다 고데니데바 독바데 고데체 독베 탑데 람데체 템바시 코네 코알레 트타다 동해 템바도 군주 템바니지 코네 코아 코다 고덴다 람덴 콤발레테네 고덴 톱네 코알레 트다 어디셰가 레체라 기분데기 가서 고람미지 추삼데 박베 람야라 게라 소발라 로발레 네버 토버체바 예노스 팔람야라 게라 소바 오 테줄라 럽고야데서 야 티바도 치교나.
So here again, for the being of initial motivation or small scope, in order, what they are trying to cease or avoid is a rebirth in the lower realms. And so in order to do that, they then engage in virtuous actions, avoiding non-virtues to be able to avoid such a rebirth. Whereas for the being of middling scope, they are trying to get out of samsara altogether. And so they are contemplating, as it explains here, how one cycles through rebirths by means of the 6 causal factors of dependent arising that are the true origins of suffering, and the 6 factors of dependent arising that are true sufferings. So reflecting on the methods for cultivating the true cessations that end the process and the path that is the means of ending that process, you obtain the definite goodness of liberation by training in the eightfold noble path, and so forth. So here, by understanding in particular, the 4 noble truths in terms of these 12 links of dependent origination, a being of middling scope understands how it is that these true origins of suffering then lead to the effects of true sufferings, and likewise how it is that through cultivating the path by training in the eightfold noble path and so forth, they can attain the kind of cessation that is the definite goodness of liberation.
Oh yeah, that is one. Atena koar nginjungi samba kewe tab koala ngebanju nginjungu samba kewe tab tamba yakshu desewara chodu gibade shenyiba meba shenda yo marese te karesne kune nyomombe tende luchunhu rwa ludo komba tenye yelase tende tene nginjungi samba ke koala tande kewe tab karesne 근데 너무 저게 텐데 로또다 로존이 콤바트레 셔라 로또 콤세데 달도 사서 로또 콤세데 가시 주니바 가시 치르베 텐데 삼르타네 로케 차네 네케바 나와다 치와다 치 동해다 예메데와다 축발어서 봐 동해대서 강가 컨디션에서 삼르타라 거기 동해 삼아 여기다 전도에다 더 밀르비치게나 미 동해 개네니치 양해시 민가 도야 고고야다 기체 동해 마부 영하여라 그래서 강가 삼르타네 때 동해 담바 삼탄거라 이 삼르타네 때 가르쳐니 용거래세 루토데 삼르탄거라 그냥 녀몬베 텐데 루토데 삼르탄거라 담보 그래서 동해 대상마데 가르쳐 오라 민더비시게네 미 동해 삼마 냐와 예다 전도 동해 삼마 가르쳐 기와라 민더시 삼르타나 미 개발랑바데 세월에 삼개월아 룩도 스티라 동해대 삼루다 로 제가 동해 가게 삼다 티가가 가릴 땐 초래 동해 땐 삼다 티 메레 개발랑바데 초래 사라 로 주집에 개발랑에 가리제 초래 로 근데 주바 스베 레레 땐 메레 개발렌제게 레 누가 투제 될 때네 초래 사 주바스벨레 미겨알렌체길레 누베투제 컨디션에 틀이야 에네 녜마사세베 니바 두치길레 틀이야 렘바데게 로 세바 슈크처르침베 렘바데 텔라소에탐 누베투제 체네 초레 삼비오라 렘바데 가르레테네 초레스나 에티 고바 렘바데 케바 세발레테네 동해대 대화를 세바 세 텔레텐 텐드바 슈처신 총거레스 진짜 삼루타네 근데 치마치마다 가마 텔레텐 졸 개바 세바세로 뜸버 소라 라 에네 두버 시험에서 가봐지 두버 렉바로 두버 렉바 왕보다 대저 손에 유다 렉바데 유다 tre바들 렉바세거라 메와 르시 르와 왕보다 셰바다 유도 tre발 때네 tre바들 렉바세거라 이 시험에서 가봐지 두버 렉바로 근데 가봐지 렉바데 가라 메게지 나가지 대절 때니 좋아레스 와 시험에서 가봐지라 가봐지를 가를 땐 좋아래 뒤따마디 시험 명수 명다 수그 때데 차 밤에 구다 안 되거든요. 시험 명수 때 가르쳐서 때 somba 남시 때도 레지 파샤냐 때게 티티를 참자서 티초래 이 남시 레 네버투제냐게 남시데 근데 이번 도지 레사는 tilcho래 이제 티 도메 마르벌 초래 어디 루도 삼르타데 티레도 티 삼르타데 동에 템바 삼르타데 왔다 동해에서 컨디션에서 텐데션도 아삼제 동해 니주게 삼바키에 동해에 삼르다 텐데데 총샤 삼겨라 다 로주 삼르다데네 도메 마르베 코네라네 이번 두지 숨바남시시와 텐데세네 아니 코르카도 아삼데 군주 때부터 삼르다겨라 도메 마르베 이번 두지 숨바남시 군주라 텔레테네 껴와슬라 시바 메수치 되쳐라 야 개바 세바 쿠바 렘바 추바 세바테 주르바 텔레테네 야 껴와라 시셰기도 어디 군주 때부터 시에거레세라 인데도서 코아르니 조게 삼바치베 탑셴이바 메바네 꾸네 녀몬베 텐데 로슨 조와다 로렌 도바 티니 옐라세 타르바 냥엘레 데발라 추메게 다 타르바 토베 토레라 남잔 쇼기 때문에 고텐다 람데니 시고라 타르바 냥엘레 데발라 추메게 데니 야다바 키베 탑세 타르바 토니 로추마 마임바케 람데 콤발라 주에데 칼테니 홍고레세나 샤니바 메바네 남바르샤베 텐데 로초다 로도 콤바데니 해서 남자 쇼게 텐데 로초다 로도 콤바테데 시고라 다 남자 쇼게 텐데 로초다 로도 콤바테니 레세라 이 가레서 로초 세데 트라도와 다메바 콤레 라 타보 고데데 요도와 코아티 코야티 텐도 타텐데스 코체 테레베서 텐도 테 마레세 메버서 요레시고라 알레 땅마티치 랍샤네야 오데
No.
단다티치 랍샤나 군중다 군에 녀모초 텐데 로중 로도 랍샤나 마운다서 오야
No. So, therefore, the excellent and peerless method to generate the thought of renunciation of cyclic existence entails reflecting on the forward and reverse orders of the afflictive factors of dependent arising. So, here, when it comes to then thinking about this kind of attitude of renunciation. So we understand through the kind of forward and reverse orders of dependent origination. So here, by looking at first the kind of truth of suffering. So if we look at our suffering, really our situation of having been born and then aging and death, but also all of the other kinds of sufferings that we experience as humans and other beings. But thinking about how we crave for things that we don't get, and we have our various kinds of plans that we wanted to accomplish aren't accomplished, or meeting with the unexpected and so forth. When we look at the kind of suffering situation that we are in particular, looking at how our suffering is coming from having been born, right? We look at the kind of links of dependent origination in a reverse order. reverse. So we're looking at where we are in terms of aging and death or having been born. So when we look at birth, that 11th link, we then see, well, this has to have come then from these previous links, particularly becoming, that kind of potent karma that was fostered by this kind of craving, which is in turn a stronger form of this sort of grasping. And so when it comes to looking at this kind of particularly the truth of suffering, we are looking at the reverse order of the afflictive factors of dependent origination. So where in turn does that craving and grasping come from? Well, it comes through feeling, and our feeling in turn comes through contact. And contact occurs based upon our having the 6 sense bases and so forth. And that in turn is dependent upon name and form. And so here, in the way that we look at this reverse order of the afflictive side of dependent origination, we then are thinking about how the true sufferings, the kind of suffering that we experience, arises due to this causal process, tracing it all the way from like birth through to becoming, and then how that comes about or that is sort of made potent through the fostering done by craving and grasping, which in turn come through feeling and contact, and all the way back through to our initial ignorance, which starts that whole process. So here, thinking about that kind of reverse order is particularly contemplating the truth of suffering. And then when we look at the forward order, this is really contemplating more the truth of the origin of suffering. So we think about, well, how is it that this suffering comes about? First, we have this thought of ignorance, and then we have the kind of ignorance leads in turn to formative actions, which are placing imprints on our consciousness and so forth, and how then these 12 links proceed in that kind of forward order. So here, we'll stop before we get to then the next part of this paragraph, but contemplating the forward and reverse orders of the afflictive factors of dependent arising are really contemplating the truth of this origin of suffering in terms of the forward order, and the truth of suffering in terms of the reverse order. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This-
Oh this. Namjang choje tenje luchoda luto kombal tene luto kumde gode de ngora lucho kumde labde de ngora ena kasore chuniba gashi chiri bala soba tezo tunghe tezo kanga kare ngana gagresre o kyo de ngana ene komeveren dures samtangora tunghe tezo sangma yoed kare tezo kare gane mevere chuchiba kyo ga sonene ko ga dures wora ete tamade chuchiba kyo de tamade lia kasi chuba sibele kasangara chuba sibele te kuba lemba ganda ganda kuba lemba te keba seba ganda gados o tinde ngama de gasona ya dona tome maruba gasona ninge bandu jile de yungu marese tinde se ya dora yesten gode de yungu doa gode tunge se yobata tise teneta 저도 고바 되는 거라 고대 되는 거라 전에 다 루조데 셔도서 다 다음에도 듣고 와라 처음에 말해봐도 다도 집어들어 다도 집어대 다도 집어나시 요 말에서 라오에 다도 요 말에서 다 동반이 주베르 버셔요라 제 다음에 봐도 kom 대도 kom고는 거 숨도 또서나 근데 이번 두지게 tome maru bade mevre dugdes tame gusu tone ga dugdes nuba chodru de tako ro nuba chodru mitin chode kesa mitin chode ge wage ko nuba chodru gara ene ti niban duji tome maru bade ga dugu yena nuba chodru niban duji le che ro sumba namshi tu chima ga du se labde kombale tene tezu kanga chodru de shegdwa o tiji shena this was Yangele deba chumeji top tamba shaniba mebane number 7 tende lujo da ludo komba dingi yenos. Or as you do,
So, and the superior and peerless method for generating a genuine, uncontrived intention for liberation involves contemplating the forward and reverse orders of the pure factors of dependent arising. So, here, when it comes to then the forward and reverse orders of the sort of purified side of the pure factors of dependent arising, we begin by looking at the kind of reverse order of that. So, if one wants to have a cessation of aging and death, or really a cessation of birth, how is it that we can cease birth? Well, one needs to then cease the prior link. So one would not be born if there were no becoming, the 10th link, and becoming wouldn't sort of that karma would not ripen if not for the previous links of craving and grasping. And so, in this way, contemplating the reverse order of the purified factors of dependent arising, we see that if one wants, say, a cessation of aging and death, a cessation of birth, then the prior link needs to cease. And so this is then we are able to establish that by ending that kind of ignorance, that if that initial ignorance is ceased, then everything that comes after it, there is a freedom from that cycle of renewed rebirth if one is able to remove the causes that led to the ripening results. And so then looking at the forward order of the pure factors of dependent arising, this is really contemplating the truth of the path. The reverse order is looking at the truth of cessation or true cessations. And here, true paths begins by contemplating first, as opposed to initial ignorance, the first link, the kind of antidote to that is selflessness. If one realizes selflessness, that there is no such autonomous self as we grasp there to be, if one recognizes that, then that diminishes, that depletes the power to engage in formative actions. So, by instead of having the first link of initial ignorance, one is to have that realization of selflessness. In turn, all of the links that would follow after that stop. The sort of by developing that opposing factor, by developing that antidote, it stops the next link from coming about. So contemplating the forward order looks really mostly at the true paths, and the reverse orders look at true cessations.
Oh yeah, that is one. Oh, that is it. That is samlatana karsura. Pena so reji samlata. Miji keja tuja reji labrwa. Miji rale tsige baris labgi bacha. Ane ko so sule labgi ore. Sula o kera labgi ore da sesuna. O ngala labgi ore sete. Ane ko ngaji shu kera. Shandaji labgi ore sa o kol labgi ore sene kayo marishita. Kera labgi ore sa o ngala labgi ore sesuna. Ngaji shu kera. Ane namsa ngala labna sa ane ko ngala shenja wagi. Ta len jab gure samche. Kyo kar ngala labgo kare se kari jagdo. Ane ko niban duji len sagi ora. Chakbe wagi. Ngaji ke so. Ane chakbe wagi. Ta kol kari che niban duji len sagira. Yesa ane kondu che kari che na. Namshi de pasha shagira. O tendre she. Mika chu len sa che andro shagdo. Da o ti shigura. Te da me ba se. Nga samsa nga rawa te me sa takwari shi komte te. Tongbani kwa ya wore cha te ne. Ko kiran chi labi kisana shira te skewa yo mar ko tawas tongbal lab dengi sori chimbato. Namji nga zu samde nga rawa te yo maro samlu nalya. Tawase de ko tene takwa samsi te. Ko tsu lab na namju na shi nga zu nganzi shuk chimbo yewe kam na shi chi yo maro. Niyo yo maro te samko. O ti indi karso da. Da namju nga zu tende yangla chunyi ko ne. Samlu to tang tune ya wuyo ra, pasha shagira. Kwa kudu tende korgi wari samre samlu ta. Ra. Kwa mewa suna tende se. Tunge temba shidi shegi wara. Tanda kwa jugbe rinpa shedi tunge temba kunju temba nidi shegi towa. Kwa dogbe rinpa shedi usan lamde dan gogden nidi. Lamde komni kwa dogdan doglu di shegi wara. Kwa jugbe rinpa shedi. Kyu le dan nyomo nila tende kwa kordan kulu di shegi towa. Oh, teach you love me.
So here, if we think about it, like say someone says some sort of bad words, something that's harsh. When we can sort of think about the links of dependent origination in terms of like if we hear someone say something like that, and then we say they say, "Oh, I'm saying that to you. I'm talking to you," and we give rise to this thought of I. Well, then all of a sudden we're mad. We're like, "What? You're saying that to me?" And we're all of a sudden like fighting and debating and disputing with that person. Whereas if they said something bad and then they say, "Oh no, I'm saying that to someone else," we don't have that same kind of reaction. We aren't going to give a response and get into this kind of creating causes from that initial thought of I. So here, this is how it kind of proceeds. If we are to, on a regular basis, contemplate the way in which we engage in these links of dependent origination, as well as how we get out of them, how we extricate ourselves from that, this is something that will be quite beneficial. So here, we need to, again, based upon the kind of engaging in them, forward and reverse. I mean, there's the forward kind of how we proceed to take rebirth due to the 12 links of dependent origination and how we avert that, how we get out of that. And it's really based upon, again, looking at this initial ignorance. We need to recognize how it is that we think I. We don't normally, most of us have this innate sense that we are something that is merely dependently designated, but rather there seems to be like this solid concrete I. And then once we have that, we are going to engage in karmas, and so it goes. But by repeatedly habituating ourselves to understanding that such an I doesn't exist, we can then cultivate the kind of antidote, selflessness, that helps lead to the end of this cycle. So here, in terms of the way in which we look at how we engage in samsara, this is really teaching the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin of suffering. And the way that we get out of that is teaching us the truth of the path and the truth of cessation, the cessation that is achieved through cultivating a particular path.
Oh yeah. Ahora teach you lamna yang tadi meta ya. Tanda wa teach you lamna yang meta. Majo namde na le ngo yoba. Tene tendo ma inde jula ke so si chiro sido. Tene sigara. Tendo ma isu tendo nenge che mare sigara. Koalera. Kichi kyuni chidu kyudu korea de sigara. O tendo ta te reba ngazo tende stu ta to te reba sna. O te tendo ma re sigara. Takwa che tendo tende te mare se. Tendo ma inde. Jula ke so si chiro. Koa kichichine chidu kyuni ko se te de gyuyo re se. Gyude mebe so na ne kon debu de humara gyu mebe ngo buchi yo mara sane. Tene tendo ma inde gyula ke so si chiro. Te gyude gare tome marik pa de ro. Sabe gyude. Tome marik pa kune lane ne le sane yong do kanga. Kyo da me gyo le sa yu do. Cha na zo kichi rala ra mebe kichi chine chikdu gyude ro re tu to khor de khoa de. Tu tendo da do ste re besna odi mare ta sera. Mebe sono soya yo re da se. Tene tendo ma inde se. Kare sene ko gyule tene yong ro ase. Gyudilia ko nyimbo top jenge kek sigre sgora. Gyulia gyudi kare kasa tanzin de ro. Tabe gyude gyuso de. Tele tene ne chaba je tawa je ne shanda yongo ara. Nyomo shanda. Sa ko nyomo de ro le sa ya te nyomo wang le sa gora. Nyomo za de tanzin de re de ora. Gyula ke so se chero se. Koe gyui pe tsaade taadun zimbate res. Tele yaani nyembo topden je kek sigre sigara. Karichane sigre sana. O taadun zimbate ka tenten do amane kyula gesa. Tene ten do amane kyula keso se chiro sana. Te kare sana. Kyutele ya taadun zimbate ko nyembo top denge meba soto dame to weshiro de meba soto resigora. Karisna taadun zimba de ngoy nezu da tumba mare. ngoi ne chu le tin de chi yo ma de chi chi lo ji lo de wa ta me ba ko be lo te ngone ko ta ne chu ngone de shin gi wa ra o te de za ko chi de ngoi ne chu da tu ba de kyab den sama yo de so ra ta yo ban zin ba de kyab den sama yo ma de te ka re ngoi ne chu da da ngone le tin de yo ba chi da tu ba ma de ko lo ba ta ba tro da zin sha yo ra ta me be ko be lo te ngone ta ge ne chu ngone de da tu ba de ngone de ngoi ne chu le chi da ne ba na shin zin ge wa re sha ra wa o te so za ko ka so ra o te ne ten do ma de kyu la ke so si shi ro si do ti chi che ane ta de zin ba de le kyab de sama me be chi so ra ko le kyab de tembo lo tu du ge sama yo ma re se ka re se te ngo ne lu re chi ji lo do shin be lo re se go ra nor je je ge wa re ta me be lo te ma nor je je go re te le ne go re te kong ge ne chi bu de nyo ro yo do ne pa ya yo re se ti me wa cha ni shen da ka ga do ya yo re se ko le ten do khor ko ba che ma re se in ten do ma in de kyu la ke so si chi ro se o te chi lam na en de ya
So here, I think it would probably be good to explain this, as it says, again, from Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika, or the Compendium on Valid Cognition. He states that, therefore, referring to here samsara and taking rebirth in samsara, this is not something that is lasting in the terms of being everlasting or permanent, because there is an antidote, or there is something that it can effectively stop the cause. So here, when we look at our situation of suffering within samsara, it is not something that is causeless, and there's nothing that is uncaused, but rather phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. So when we look at our cycling within samsara, we can identify that there is a cause. It is that initial ignorance, and it's not something that will last or remain forever, because there is an antidote that can act as an effective antidote that actually counteracts that initial ignorance. So we initially have this grasping at a self, this idea of an I, and out of that, then we give rise to attachment and aversion and all of the various afflictions. But out of our afflictions, we then accomplish all kinds of negative actions, which in turn create this cycling within samsara. But there is an antidote that is actually effective against that grasping at a self. And grasping at a self, that apprehension of a self, doesn't accord with reality. But the realization of selflessness is backed by valid cognition, is supported by valid cognition. And so the mind, as we meditate on selflessness, it would get stronger and stronger to the point where it is able to eradicate completely that grasping at a self. And this is really due to the fact that the realization of selflessness is supported by valid cognition, is backed by reality. It accords with reality. Whereas the grasping at a self is not backed by any kind of valid cognition. It is something that is false, is able to be undermined by that correct understanding. So here it is in Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika, he explains that really this kind of situation we are in is not something which is everlasting, because there is an effective antidote to what causes it.
oh yeah oh that is why that is my lotion oh ne ka do se na ya se ba ko le sham do se do se ba ko lo go de le yi chi ti ora do chi ti ora te se ora se ba ko le sham do ka ri ti ora se na sambar cha shin yo ora cha se ro she so ye su su che ba ni de ku ba so o de se ba ko le sham de le ya ne de do sho lo ka ni ora o ti ti so ora sa ye ge se ba ko le sham de le ya ko le o de le do sho lo ka ni bu de ti so ora te ka re se de o de do te ko ba so de se ba ko lo de be chu de be do de ni le de na do se ra ke long da de su su che ba ni bu su je ni bu de ka re se de re se sambar cha shin yo ora cha se ro sambar cha shin yo ora ta chin de wo le yo de te chen de ma to go ke do sambar cha shin yo ora cha se Sanje Tenlan Jubar Shas. Tatunda Koa la Soba Tatun Zimbal Soba Yamupa, Tozuba, Panye Tunda la Samgo, Bezu Chego de Sura, Bezu Chenene, Koe, Kutus Pankanga, Yunku Meba Sogo de Sugora. Sanje Tenlan Jubar Shas, Sanje Sumbe Tembalia, Koa Pangji la Soba Tinde Soba de Jubar Shas. And Dambi Kimla Lanjin Chida de Jubar Shas. Dambi Kimla Damza Se Chora. Langbo Chetos Damjana Shukan and it. Damgitsatos the parts to pay Chetorche Kasakalpe. Pay some Shagra. Dambusi Shunal and Damzas Rumbuske. The Langbo Chetina Shuka Sobotu Jundana. Satos Kangapa Mavaso Shagra. Dambi Kimla Lanjis. Lanjing to join the Kanga Chomse. Chida Tene Shombar Shase. O Chiva. Rameba Chichigi. Chida della Soba Tupa, Shombar Shas, Rala Rawameba, Soji Pumbo Rawadon Gagwa Checo, Tupa Mevso Shosera, Chida de Shombar Shah. Kashi Rabdu Paye, Shundi de la Church was. Kashi Rabdu, Yo Kashi Paye, Suda Demba Subsochen Paye, but Sanjay Sombe Chun Delia, Koan Dochiki Kutuzula, Cheva Yenesura, Shundi de la Church. Chundu and Dilla Chever Curvas. And to get them by Ponche Tati, Tamito Balas over Tetsura. Koyakawa Rabane, Siba Tamati, Koyakawa the Pane, Sibane, Tarsheba Chigres, and Mabas over the Segura. Oh, she's on. She tours are also Shase. Then did Chindi in the water to Yamdo Losh and the other. She's on, don't dig a Tadun Zimbe. Marik be tendeki kenji doa ritu do korkiwa tangzi marik be kenji ane le kiti nisa ne doa ritu do kiwa langiwa de sera ane kiwa langiwa de sera kenji je le nipan duchi je le je tendi juwa ne sita nipan duchi sumba tendi ala chungi shegura chuchi ba kiwe tendi je pawarki Juni Bakashi Tende Jung Tsu Samde, Lujungi Kone, Toma Mebane, Adeba to Kuleta Numombe, Wangi Rani Kor Kurzu Sambata, Ode, Samleton Sugara to Sambarchas, Yorchas. Yang Koa Tome Marikbe, Nyemburu Marikbe Shi, Tome Marikba, the Nyembudala Marikbe Shigi. Ameba Musum to talk about Lambje, Temba, Kombale, Tome Marigba, Gagbatas. That Taming Musum to talk Mariba Gati, Nibantin Gasuba, and the Mariba Gagbale, Dujin Gagbala Soba Kanga, Chimasma Gadura. At the Derek Gabe, Kashin Gabe, Parto, Sambarse, Yomarcha, Sanje Talan Jumbarsara. Ludoji Kone Koan Dogbala Sundu Zambar Sashes. Ludoji Kone, Luchunda Ludoji Kone Koa Ya Tenikasura, Dogbala Zambar Sashes. Koya Pinzola Zambar Sashin Yorshaiba. Tatunda Luchun Ludo Samlutane Koal and Dogbala and the Sundu Zambar Chako. Sundu Shen Luchun Ludola Soba Comne. Koan doye tabshi chongo re songda, zambar shashi. Yungwar shashi, koye punzo la shenje chakba, koye pusum chokba la shenje chakba. Yerwa nipan duji lesa liya, chakdango lesa yora. Chakba de rabdu yungde, zambar shashi, yungwar shashi, chakdangi bude, nyamu de pa yungwar shashi, seba la soba. Zambar shashi, yungwar shashi. Sanje Telan Jubaja, Sanje Lungi Tambet, Koa Jubata, Telen Dobe, Judan Rebusu, Sanje Telan Juba, Koa Judo, Yiribatum, Betendi Alachuni Tembe, Siba Kolola, so to some Becadel. Sanje de Tembe, Koa Jubata, Telen Dobe, Judan Rebusu, Tembashi, Landola Jubar Chaose, Koa Jube, Ribata Dobe Riba, Seni Gudwa. Kune nyomo be tende luchung luto samne tunge temba kunju temba ni yongui ba. Nambar chanwe tende luchung luto samne go tenda lamde ni de yongui ba tal shetsara. Odi sungura. Kyudan drebu chu temba shi lando lan jubar sambar cha shi yongse. Sanje ten lan jubar cha se de do. Dabu kimla lanje shin se pechan so do da. Ya ena lanje jen dabu kim shobar cheba shindu jowa tondo nyewa namje jan chida jite seba seba so nyomomba nam shombar chashe chida dene shombar chashe nyomombe tuyudere da chida soso raame ba shichungenge chida ki tu seba del sedwa seba chakba del nyomomba nam shombar chashe kyo kanshi ki rabdu 아유 버리셔야 돼서 치다 되셔. 좀 버셔 가지고 생기다 좀 남지 치다 되셔. 가시 랍도 봐요 배서더라. 저 가시에서 랍도서 숙천부 아유 춘대 삽소신 게서라. 아유 버셔야 돼. 그네 너무 봐. 되지. 다음에 봐 무슨도 떡배. 안에 가서 람라서 봐 파베 람야라 깨지. 춘도 안 될라. 쮸버 교환하네. 잠바저 상계된 좀 남자 치라죠. 가시 랍도 바에베 춘드델레 쮸교와서 바람이 알라 게라서 뭐 춘도 안델레서도 춘드델레 쮸교와 게 코아라바네 동에다 맞춰버는 요새 저도 연락 제게 춘도 안델라 쮸버는 교로 남네 코에 교와 랍도 바네 제가 나실라서 봐 동에 균이 제발 제발 교로서 다들 받을로시나 단데 딸 셰창게레도 아까 마칼리 롤체 챈드도 야
So, picking up in the text, again, with regard to the drawing of the wheel of life, it is said that the Buddha gave instructions to write below the wheel of life 2 verses, as explained in his exegesis of the discipline. So here, these were verses that the Buddha said should be written below the wheel of life. These 2
yeah,
verses then read, undertaking this and leaving that, enter into the teaching of the Buddha, like an elephant in a thatched house, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death. Those who with thorough conscientiousness practice this disciplined doctrine will forsake the wheel of birth, bringing sufferings to an end. So here, then the kind of commentary to this comes in following. So here, this example of an elephant is used. Like an elephant, I don't know what exactly it would be called, like reeds or something. And when an elephant goes down and stomps all over that, in the same way that like if you had a house that was made out of like reeds or some sort of thatching, an elephant could make pretty quick work of that. And so here, someone who is contemplating enters into the teaching of the Buddha, undertakes this and leaves that. And we'll get into in the passage that comes below exactly what that's referring to. So this scripture also explains how to contemplate conditioning factors, the second factor of dependent arising, which projects rebirth in cyclic existences as the 5 or 6 types of beings due to the initial ignorance apprehending as self. So again, thinking about the reverse order and the forward order in terms of initial ignorance then creates conditioning factors, which is that which acts as a cause, a sort of projecting cause for a rebirth in samsara. So this contemplation then continues up to how aging and death arises depending on the 11th factor of dependent arising, birth. So the scripture explains this contemplation of how you pass through cyclic existence from beginningless time up to now under the power of causal karma and afflictions in terms of this forward order. So again, thinking about that forward order in which it is the case that due to this initial ignorance, we create karmic actions, and in turn, the kind of craving and grasping leads to nurturing those karmas into further existence, or sorry, becoming, and then birth and aging and death and so forth. So furthermore, and explains how to contemplate the way to end initial ignorance by meditating on its countermeasure, the truth of the path that directly knows the non-existence of the self that is the referent object of ignorance. So due to this cessation of ignorance, the second factor, conditioning factors, ceases. This process of cessation continues until due to the cessation of birth, aging, and death cease. So this then gets into the description of the verse. You should undertake, the first part of that verse, joyous perseverance with respect to the cessation of cyclic existence by means of the reverse order. So undertaking the kind of various paths that will act as a countermeasure to that initial ignorance. And you will certainly emerge from cyclic existence, leaving behind attachment to and clinging to the marvels of cyclic existence. So in this way, you enter the purpose of the verbal teaching of the Buddha, the adopting and discarding described within the Four Noble Truths, the way of cause and effect for entering cyclic existence and reversing that process. So again, the kind of stages of engaging and samsara and extricating oneself from that are the way in which one sort of engages in the teachings. You adopt what is to be taken up into practice and what is to be discarded from the Four Noble Truths based upon that. And thereby, then the example is given. Moreover, just like an elephant destroying a thatched house, those who are intent on liberation destroy the afflictions of craving and so forth, the forces of the Lord of Death. So here we often hear this referred to as the Mara of death, that taking death uncontrollably due to the factors of karma and the afflictions. And so one is able to overcome that by having destroyed the kinds of causes that lead to renewed rebirth. So after becoming thoroughly conscientious in the sense of being careful with respect to what one takes up and what one avoids, they will practice this disciplined doctrine of the Eightfold Path that disciplines the afflictions, the wisdom that directly knows selflessness and so forth. They will then eliminate birth in cyclic existence and sever the continuity of the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so forth. So those who, based upon this understanding, are disciplined or conscientious, then will engage in such a way as they are able to, like an elephant destroying a thatched house, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death.
Oh yeah, this one.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that the mala. Tamba sanje je shilam drebe che chinyi je sungba nam ne se do. Sanje chumden de shi. Tamba ni lam tapshi ni drebu ku ni stre chane de. Shi temba shi se lam tende chane de. Shi temba ni se kunzu temba da tondambe temba sigora. Tondambe temba tongba ni de she de ko nyamo la soba kanga. Waye tapshi de she do. Kunzu temba de she de tenje de bar jo ala ya chachi ronwa. Thabkhe chatu zu kanga yongora. Tenje de bar jo ala chachi merona ni chamba nyingji chanju go samla soba chimba tsuten soba la soba. Tezo tende mego ge su de chadu yora. Oh, ke de ko tabdo shirab ni de. Nigal yogo yorto shile ya. Shi namsha de lot karsoda. Temba ni shi temba ni se. Tondambe temba tongba ni. Tondamba tongba ni ina ya. Chawa kanya merong ya tongba mayimba. Tenje drebar jowa. Rawa du drube. Chawa chenge shimena. Mangbo chi so ne tenje drebar jowe. Chawa chenge yore. Se kunzu temba de she yora. Tele ya ane kwa konge yore. Tonghe nyonge yore. Te sonza tezo le mene nyingji kiya. Chamba kiya. Rawa chanju usem kiya. Chimba taone pendo yoba. Soba komkwe la soba. Tezo kange yong yora. Tabji chade. Tongba nye di mena. Tongdambe namshati yogu mara. Tonghe le tsawa. Tonghe ki tsawa chuji ki tab mega chagara. Kunzu tenje drebar jowa. Kunzu di mena. Tabji chade mega chagara. Shi tenpa nyi se. Lam tabshi nyi se ra. Shi tenpa nyi ki namshati manowa chi yo na. Ene lam tabda shirab nyi di manowa chi yo ra. Drebu ku nyi se. Thar drebu toya de ku nyi se. Sonam je tso sabala tene. Kunzu la tembe sonam je tso sabala tene suku. Ene tongba nyi tokbe. 대조 교체는 추구세 추수지 꾸니시거라 추구들의 시추고 뭐니고 방자 방배 좋아 저번에가 방바들래요 방바대요 거래 저 담정 웃음도 캠바대요 거라 근데 수고들래 농구다 주고시 대바신 붙이나 어디 용거라 어디 지람나 가서 점바 산계지 실람 대비 최진이지 송바 남 땡진 대바를 좋아 니래 니라 자외 신전에 송바시 땡진 대바를 좋아 최송에 대고랑 다가서 좀 기순도 시샤 말아 뭐네 중이나 매나 된데게 말해 땡진 대바를 좋아 뭐고 고랑게 로 수자 테로레자 최라 소바 뭐고 고랑게 내당을 때네 아니 템바니 송거래 소라 최진이 송바 남네 땡진 대바를 좋아 니라 자외 신전에서 땡진 대바를 좋아 최고라주 내당들이야 아니 터두게 내당 동반이다 이나 동반 라와도 주베 동반 이나야 근데 초점을 때네 샤와치 통계지 땡진 대바를 좋아지 샤 토구도와 대인데 대졸이 신전에 송거래서 시 남샤소데 달라 때네 탑 람시니다 근데서 탑대 시랍 때주대 되게다 템바 산계지 실람 대비 최진이지 송바 남네 땡진 대바를 좋아 니라 자외 신전에 송신에서 타르 법사야 땡진 대바를 좋아 좋아 내남 인시 땡진 대바를 좋아 최남 랑신기 주베 동신도 땡들라 내가라 땡들라 자제 내가라 어레 땡들라 자제 탐제 로아 대신도 또 가와 고네 다자게 덤베 강이 도시된도 응벌조바 상견에 샤트 다트인지 봐도 주제기 쉬마송바를 쉬소세 대동반이게 쳐대 사부인발을 공대 상계 상계산 남사 디지털비 최시 코인이 술을 땡겨 거면 메모낭담니도 내버샤세 마숨제 쉬에도 또 까고 소자 안데 땡데 송바레스로 디버터 치조나
So here, the Buddha, so in every single statement of the Buddha's teachings concerning the basis, path, and goal, he makes dependent arising the fundamental basis. So here, when we talk about the basis, the path, and the goal, or the basis, path, and result, we have first the two truths, conventional and ultimate truth, that are the basis. And then there is the path in terms of the two, method and wisdom. And then there is the goal or the result of the two bodies, a form and truth body. And so here, when it comes to the basis, these two truths, ultimate truth, is the method by which we are able to eliminate that grasping at some kind of true existence. So emptiness is actually what it enables the kind of freedom from the suffering situation that we are in. But this emptiness isn't some sort of nihilistic kind of emptiness where nothing else is able to function or exist, but rather it is compatible with the truth of conventional existence, that all actions and agents are viable within this, that even though they are merely dependently designated, we can still talk about actions bringing about results and so forth. And so although the Buddha has spoken about emptiness and the lack of inherent existence, he still talks about there being beings who are within samsara, those who cycle within this cyclic existence. And so here then, when it comes to the basis, then there is the truth of, there's conventional truth describing the kind of ways of understanding causality, and ultimate truth, their lack of any kind of inherent existence. Now, when it comes to then the path, there is the method side, which really comes from the kind of conventional truth, and the wisdom side. So without having this wisdom, there would be no way to develop the kind of understanding that cuts that root of cyclic existence. But if there were no a method side, then one wouldn't be able to engage in the various activities that act as causes to achieve this particular goal. So the result then comes in terms of the form body and the truth body, the form body being the result of the accumulation of merit, and the truth body being the result of the accumulation of wisdom. And we can talk about within the truth body, there being that that is the sort of cessation, the true cessations in terms of the abandonment, the freedom that comes from the abandonment of the various afflictions and then cognitive obscurations, as well as the wisdom that realizes all phenomena. So that kind of positive, the realization side, as well as the abandonment side. And so here, when it comes to the Buddha's teachings regarding the basis, the path, and the result, this is not as though he is making up some sort of story about dependent origination, but rather these are all based in dependent origination as being the reality, the way that things exist. It's not some sort of story that is being made up, but rather this is a description of the reality of the way that things are. So, as it says here, when arriving at the final conclusion, his essential points are about dependent arising. While dependently arisen phenomena are empty of inherent establishment, all activities and functions are feasible as dependent arisings. So realizing that this is very difficult to understand, our teacher, after reaching completely perfect Buddhahood and Bodhgaya, stayed without giving the teaching about freedom from elaboration for 7 weeks. So again, the Buddha realized this very profound truth. Again, these two are compatible in that we have emptiness of inherent existence, but that actually reinforces dependent origination. It's not as though there's an autonomous emptiness out over there, or that method and wisdom are totally separate. But the kind of truth of this, as there is a verse that summarizes, is something extremely profound, such that after having realized this, the Buddha did not initially teach for 7 weeks, thinking that no one would be able to understand this profound reality or this profound truth which he had realized.
Oh yeah, that is. Oh,
We are out of time then for today, so we will stop here for today.
Thank you so much for your teachings today, Geshe. And Katrina, thank you for your translations. Again, a reminder that we only have 1 or 2 classes left in this series. And so if you'd like to make an offering to Geshe or Katrina or to the Abbey for hosting, the information is in the chat box. And we'll hope to see you next Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll finish with some dedication prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Loseling's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah, what's up?
Recording stop.
Oh yeah.